The problem is his judgment, which he clearly has been lacking in as an adult. It's one thing to have foolish, youthful indiscretions, but I'm sorry, you cannot get past. It is not a Nazi-style tattoo. It is the tattoo of concentration camp guards. It is the very worst tattoo you can get if you are getting anything Nazi, and that's a pretty high bar there. So this has been a slow motion train wreck ever since that tattoo and knowledge of it hit the world, and it's only going to get worse. These texts, there are multiple women. Are all those women going to keep their mouths shut from now until Election Day? What do you think, Lauren?
He was apparently on this app called Kick, and 60% of Kick's 15 million monthly active subscribers between the ages of 13 and 24 years old. The National Center on Sexual Exploitation has labeled it a predator's paradise. So I do have questions about why you would be on a site like that. So you've got that. You've got the Nazi chest tattoo. You've got the sexting scandal with other women. He's made racist remarks. He made the remark about that the veterans should have been killed. Right? It's on, and we're not even in a general election. So there's going to be so much more. So do Democrats care about character, or do they care about power?
There are Democrats who have concerns, and some of them are speaking out about it. This was the first weekend that I feel like Democrats were really pushed on the Sunday shows. Dana Bash was doing that as well with Andy Kim from New Jersey, who wanted to talk about what's going on at Delaney Hall, and she kept bringing it back to this. Listen, Graham Platner's wife is not a professional political spouse, and Graham Platner is not a professional politician himself, and you're seeing that come to light. Chuck Schumer wanted Janet Mills to win. He got her to jump into this race because someone like a Jared Golden didn't want to get in, and that didn't work. Mainers have consistently said, we know who Graham Platner is, and this is what our choice is at this point. And I think that Democrats are feeling a little bit like we're not going to be lectured at this point from certainly Republicans that support Donald Trump, or telling us in Texas that Ken Paxton is a better choice than James Tallarico. In a few weeks, we're going to see Ken Paxton's public divorce trial. He's being divorced on biblical grounds. And they want us to get hot and bothered about Graham Platner's
We'll see what happens in Texas, but Maine is a different issue.
Well, it is a different issue. No, but you're still asking people.
I have never heard Cory Booker say, I've got concerns about a
But that, to me, is more honestly about the Totenkopf, about the tattoo, than it is about those text messages.
Which is a whole other conversation.
It is an enormously important conversation.
If male politicians cheating on...
Sonny Hostin sat on that panel, looked directly into the camera, and said, I am conflicted, quote unquote. Then went down the list herself. Cheater, racist, anti-Semi, liar, homophobe, checked every single box herself, and still couldn't bring herself to walk away from supporting Graham Platner for a Senate seat. And the one moment tells you everything you need to know about how this actually works, because the question was never really about character. It was always about power. So today we're breaking down who Graham Platner actually is, what The View said about him on live television, and what it reveals when the same people who lecture everybody else about decency sit on camera and tell you plainly that none of it matters when a Senate seat is on the line. So let's start with Graham Platner, who Graham Platner actually is, because you need the full picture before any other media reactions make sense. And the picture is not good. So Platner is the Democrat primary winner in Maine, running against Republican Susan Collins for her Senate seat. He beat sitting Governor Janet Mills to get there, which is already notable because Chuck Schumer personally recruited Janet Mills into this race to stop Platner, and it still didn't work. So now Democrats are stuck with a guy who won their primary while carrying a list of problems that would end most political careers before they ever got started. And the first thing on that list is a Nazi chest tattoo he wore for 20 years. And this wasn't some vague or ambiguous tattoo that you could reasonably misread or have misread, because one of the panelists on The View made the point directly that it was specifically the tattoo of concentration camp guards, not just a generic bad symbol, but the very worst category of Nazi imagery you can put on your body. So when Platner says he didn't know what it meant for 2 decades, that's a lie sitting right on top of everything else. And I'll say it plainly. If that tattoo was on your body for 20 years, you knew, and claiming ignorance now is just adding dishonesty to an already long list. And right behind the tattoo comes the racist remarks and the homophobic posts that were showing up as recently as 2021. So this is an ancient history that predates his political awareness. These are recent enough that he was a grown adult making conscious choices, according to critics and others. And then there's the Purple Heart recipient comment, which gets buried under everything else, but absolutely should not be, because what Platner actually said was that a soldier who ran directly into enemy fire to save his teammates, quote unquote, should have died. And that the only reason he's alive is because the enemy had bad aim, quote unquote. And just sit with that for a second, because a man threw himself into danger to protect the people around him, earned one of the highest honors this country gives out. And Platner's response to that was that he should have died out there. And one of the panelists on The View said it clearly as it can be said, if you are capable of saying that at any point in your life, you already shown me who you are. And after that comes the Kick app situation, which they were explaining in the first clip that just got played, which is straightforward once you have the numbers, because 60% of Kick's 15 million monthly active users are between 13 and 24 years old, and the National Center on Sexual Exploitation has labeled it as a predator's paradise. So the question isn't complicated. It's just, why is a Senate candidate spending his time on an app like that? And nobody's giving a straight answer. And then there's the sexting scandal. And what makes this one confirmed rather than rumor is that it was Platner's own wife who handed the messages to his campaign as a heads up, meaning she disclosed it herself before he could get ahead of the story. So when he tries to walk it back, now his own wife's actions already answered the question, and his excuse for the racist remarks was PTSD from serving in Afghanistan. And one of the View hosts responded to that with something anybody watching could follow. She said she knows plenty of veterans with PTSD who aren't racist, and that's just the truth. PTSD is real and serious, but it's not a receipt you hand over to cancel out 2 decades of documented behavior. So now that you got the full picture on who this man is, let's talk about what happened when The View actually had to address it on camera.
That, just in the last few months, we've dealt with the Eric Swalwell scandal, which was horrible, and with the scumbag from Texas, what was his name, Tony Gonzalez, the Republican who was having the affair with his staffer. That was horrible. There is no doubt that this guy, Platner, is flawed in many ways. This is different than the Eric Swalwell thing so far, because no women have come forward that I know of or that have been reported. We haven't seen the sex like we did with Swalwell, but it is disturbing and it is horrible. And why can't we do better? Why can't we have better candidates? Why do we have to have Ken Paxton in Texas, who has got baggage that it's not even baggage, it's steamer trunks of ethical questions around him? It's just kind of sad.
What a lot of Democrats are arguing is that the path to Democrats taking back the Senate runs through Maine and winning this seat where he's the nominee. And what I would say as a Republican who sadly watched the quality of candidates we've chosen to put in office or to run diminish over the last decade, I'll tell you it's not worth it. It's not worth compromising your morals and values and integrity. To be honest, his sexting is the least of my concerns with this
that's
guy.
what I thought.
Graham Platner trashed a Purple Heart recipient, said he didn't deserve to live, defamed fallen Navy SEAL Chris Kyle, downplayed how hard it is to report sexual assault in the military, repeatedly used anti-gay slurs and homophobic posts as recently as 2021, called himself an avowed communist, and has a Nazi tattoo for 20 years that he's since covered up. This guy just seems like a guy of not very good character. And there are a lot of options in this country. And by the way, there are other paths for Democrats to win. Just win a different state. You need 4 seats. Look at Alaska, look at Iowa, look at Texas. Don't die on the hill of a guy who is going to be a headache for you for years to come.
And not to make this political, because I'm usually not the one that does that, but watching that video of the wife saying, don't spend energy on these ads. The problem with these ads is they are true. These accusations are true. What they're doing to James Tallarico in Texas are calling him things that he isn't. That's where you don't spend energy is on false information. But on this, I would argue, you tell it like it is. This is a character flaw. This isn't, Platner has said, he did it in form. I'm sorry, I didn't mean it. I've changed. This is a problem. The Purple Heart recipient, by the way, the video he insulted, was a man who took fire to save his team. And he said, this stupid guy should have died. It's only because they didn't have good aim that he's here. If you were capable of saying that at any time in your life, you've shown me who you are, and I heard you. This man should be nowhere near Congress. We've already got a wealth of people we need out. We're not sending one like this in.
Yeah, I am conflicted.
Thank you.
I am conflicted. They asked Cory Booker how he felt about this because I think all the allegations are true. The sexting with other women while married is definitely true because his wife is the person that gave the messages to his campaign to give them a heads up. So the fact now that he's saying that part is
messages.
not true.
I think she said that he had she told them campaign but we haven't seen messages.
But she disclosed it.
Right.
So why would she lie about that? So that part is true. He's also made racist remarks about against African Americans. So he's a cheater. He's an anti-Semite because the fact that he had that tattoo for 20 years and didn't know what it was is a lie. So he's a liar, a racist, an anti-Semite.
Homophobe.
He's a homophobe. So he's all the things, and character does matter. But we have someone that has almost unbridled power in the White House at this point. There are no checks and balances. And the only way that we can maybe bring a bit of our democracy back is by having a Congress that functions and that has these checks and balances. And I do think one of the only ways is to win that seat in Maine. And so like Cory Booker said, this is a concern, but our country is in grave
There are other paths,
peril.
and they don't have to go through Maine.
We'll see what happens. But these are character flaws that I'm tired of hearing about.
Yeah, me too.
I'm tired of it. I'm just like, just keep it in your pants. Just stop being stupid.
Oh,
you know?
I need to add that he said that he sent the racist things because he was suffering from PTSD from his tour in Afghanistan. Right. I know a lot of soldiers that have PTSD that aren't racist.
Yeah. Listen, who knows what is what, but I'd like the quality of the people we are dealing with to be better.
Yes.
Yeah.
And again, we can ask for better. And you're right about Tyreek. I was shocked to see what they were trying to pin on him because they can't get it. You know, I mean, he's a good kid.
So they got to make up
He's
stuff.
like making stuff.
When you're having to, when you're working.
We'll leave it there. So The View sits down to actually talk about this, as you heard, and what's interesting is the conversation starts honest. The hosts are going back and forth. They're acknowledging the scandals are real. Nobody on the panel is trying to pretend the receipts don't exist. And the Republican panelist on the show said something that actually landed because she talked about watching her own party spend the last decade lowering its standards to hold on to power and said flat out it wasn't worth it. She said power is not worth compromising your values, and that's somebody speaking from experience rather than theory because she watched it play out with her own team in real time. And she's telling Democrats the same lesson is sitting right in front of them if they want to see it. Because the road she watched Republicans go down didn't end well, and this road looks identical from where she's standing. So she's not coming at this as an outsider. She already lived a version of this story where her own side made the same trade, and she's telling you how it turned out. And then Sunny Hostin takes her turn, and this is where everything shifts. Because she doesn't deny anything. She goes right down the list herself. She's the one saying cheater, racist, anti-Semite, liar, homophobe, out loud. She checks every single box herself and then pivots immediately to, but we need that Senate seat to check Trump, quote unquote. And just like every label she just read off stops mattering. And just like that. And that's the pattern every single time, no matter what the scandal is, no matter how long the list gets. The answer always lands on but Trump, quote unquote. And that closes the conversation, is my point. That's the full argument. That's where it ends. And what's wild is the people making that argument don't seem to notice how much it reveals about them, because what you're actually saying when you follow a list of character flaws with but Trump, quote unquote, is that your own stated values have a price, and that price is one Senate seat. Now, here's where the contradiction becomes impossible to ignore, because these are the same people who have spent years saying they respect moderate Republicans who push back against Trump. They say it constantly. They hold those Republicans up as proof that real decency still exists somewhere across the aisle. And Susan Collins is literally that person. She's sitting in that Maine seat right now, She's not a Trump loyalist. She's not MAGA. She's been a problem for Trump's agenda more than once. And Democrats have claimed repeatedly that's exactly the kind of Republican they can work with. So by their own stated logic, the choice in Maine should be straightforward. A moderate anti-Trump Republican they publicly say they respect versus a self-described communist with a 20-year concentration camp guard tattoo who said a decorated soldier survival was a failure of enemy aim. And they're still calling it a difficult decision, still finding reasons to stay in Platner's corner. And that tells you the "we like moderate Republicans," quote unquote, line was never really the point. When a political party goes on television, reads every reason a person is unfit for public office, and then says they're supporting him anyway, they handed you a window into what they actually prioritize. And what they prioritize is holding a seat over who sits in it. And that's not a small admission to make on camera because it strips away the entire argument they've been running for years. The argument that they are the side that holds leaders to a standard and demands accountability from people in power. And once Sonny Hostin said those words on that panel, there's no walking them back because that clip exists, as you guys just seen and heard. Those words are on record, and the framing they relied on doesn't carry the same weight after that moment. And Sonny Hostin's specific reasoning was that Democrats need Platner in Congress to restore checks and balances because too much power is concentrated in one place right now. And on paper, that sounds like a serious argument about how government is supposed to function. But think about what she's actually saying, because she wants to send a man with zero personal checks on his own behavior to Washington to check someone else's power. And that logic collapses the second you say it plainly, because a person who spent 20 years with that tattoo on his chest, who looked at a decorated soldier survival and framed it as a missed opportunity for the enemy, who was sending messages to other women while married, and whose own wife confirmed it before he could spin the story, that person doesn't become a principled guardian of democratic norms the moment he gets a Senate badge. The character he's already demonstrated doesn't disappear when a job title changes. It just gets a larger platform and fewer consequences. And think about it in terms anybody can connect to. If your manager pulled you aside at work and said, "Look, I know this guy's a liar. I know he's made racist comments. I know he cheated on his wife, but we need him on the team to beat the other department." You won't sit there weighing institutional arguments. You know exactly what kind of place you're working in, and you understand that values posted on the break room wall were decoration, not direction. And that's the moment regular people watching at home lost faith or lose faith. Not because politicians are supposed to be perfect, because nobody believes that, but because the people making the argument are admitting out loud that the principles they've been selling were always conditional, always subject to whether the seat was worth it this particular cycle. And once people see that clearly on camera with no denial and no spin, they start running that same logic across everything else those same voices have ever said. And the trust doesn't just dip, it drains. So when it comes to, or come down to this, it's pretty simple. Character isn't something you factor in after you already checked everything else off the list. It's not the tiebreaker you pull out when two options are otherwise equal. It's the foundation you build everything else on top of. And when you skip it for convenience, you always pay for it eventually, because the person you made excuses for becomes the standard. You're now measured against whether you want to admit that or not. And Proverbs chapter 22 verses 1 says a good name is more desirable than great riches. And that's not just something you read on Sunday morning and move on from, because it's a practical truth about how trust actually functions in the real world. Because a person who trades their integrity for a Senate seat has already set their own price. They did it themselves openly on camera. And once you know the price, you can't unknow it. And this isn't a Republican issue or a Democrat issue, because both sides have sat in this exact chair at different moments and had to answer for the same kind of compromise. So this isn't about scoring points on one team. It's about what you're actually constructing when winning becomes the only thing that matters. Because the candidates you defend, the voices you platform, and the people you put in rooms where real decisions get made all reflect something back at you. And if someone has already shown you who they are through their own choices over 20 years, Maya Angelou's line holds, right? Believe them the first time. You don't need a second demonstration because the first one already told you everything. So, the second Sonny Hostin finished reading the list: cheater, racist, anti-Semite, liar, homophobe, and followed it with But we need that seat, quote unquote. She answered the question nobody wanted to say plainly. Power was always the priority, and the principle were just packaged around it. And Galatians chapter 6, verses 7 says, you reap what you sow, so eventually the candidates you go to bat for become the ceiling you're stuck under because you built the floor out of compromise. And now you got to stand on it. And that's not a political problem. That's a character problem. And character problems don't stay contained to one election cycle. They compound. So ask yourself honestly, if character only matters when it's convenient, does it actually matter at all? Drop your honest answer in the comments because I read every single one. Subscribe if you want more plain English breakdowns like this. And pass it to somebody in your life who needs to see it. Catch you in the next one. Peace.